All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Tonight we'll be doing game analysis night. Remember, this is less of a focus on the play-by-play and the action of the game, but more so discussing the mechanics and everything else that comes behind making pro players so awesome. Tonight we have Kuro and Azaraki that'll be casting this first game. And getting right into things, we're going to go ahead and find them a game, probably off of, yeah, let's just go into this one. It looks like we're only 3 minutes into the game, so if you guys could go ahead and spectate off of me, we'll get you guys into this right away.
Fantastic, thank you.
Indeed.
Indeed. So, while we wait for this to load up, Azaraki, how you doing, brother?
Doing pretty well myself. How's it going on your end?
Well, I am doing great, going up some in the divisions. However, we're going to take a break into the loading screen. We have Shaco, a Vygar, a Singed, a Kog'Maw, and a Leona. To break that down, Shaco's in the jungle, Vygar's in the mid lane, Singed up top, with the bottom lane being carried up with Kog'Maw and Leona versus a Draven, Ezreal, Lulu, Nasus, and Tryndamere. More than likely to Tryndamere top, probably an Ezreal mid, as we're going to see, and of course Draven AD carry. Anything you want to touch on, especially with AP Ezreal becoming popular now?
Yeah, AP Ezreal is certainly, as you said, becoming a little bit more popular nowadays, and for the most part that's because, we have this big expression on, cooldowns on Ezreal. That's one of the biggest things that's going on right now. Basically, whenever he hits something with, it doesn't even have to be a champion. Whenever he hits a minion, a neutral camp, a champion, whatever it be, with his Q, all of his other cooldowns get reduced. So that's something where if you have maximum cooldown reduction and you're hitting those Qs all the time, then your ultimate, you can get that back up 20 seconds or so. It's a very, very short amount. And not only that, but you're also turned into one of the slipperiest champs in the game. You really have so many arcane shifts available to you every couple of seconds if you land those Qs. So that's one of the reasons why not only AP Ezreal is becoming more popular, but as we know, the blue Ezreal.
Absolutely, and blue Ezreal is so strong, and of course, it was semi-inspired by, again, the fact of needing to kite as an AD carry, plus no longer having mana issues thanks to the tier being made into the Manamune, and then, of course, further on, the Muramana. So that covers a lot of his weaknesses that most people say he has.
Yeah, it really does, because Ezreal is one of these squishier AD carries, but now that you can basically arcane shift every couple of seconds, it works out pretty fine. And I'm not quite sure what ended up happening early game, but we see a level 8 Tryndamere going up against a level 5 Singed. Something obviously happened in this game. Sorry we couldn't catch that on stream, but it's pretty huge.
Well, as we can see, Tryndamere is leading it up with 3 kills in the top lane and only 1 death, and it looks like Singed has the mirror of that. So I'm guessing that's what happened in the top lane. And Nasus having 2 assists versus Shaco having 0. I'm pretty sure lane ganks were the weapon of choice for Tryndamere's kills.
Yeah, I would have to assume so as well. And right now we're already seeing the fact that Shaco at this point, he's starting to get a couple of kills as well. Just 2-1 at the moment, so he's doing a fairly good job of playing Shaco the way he needs to. The biggest concern I have about that is that he's not really making the rest of his lanes do well. He's the only one who's really doing very well on his team. He's got 2-1, he's got 34 jungle creeps. However, Singed is really far behind. Leona has a death. We have a lot of kills around the map, and they're not particularly for the blue team. Vygar is really the only one carrying his lane, basically ahead of his lane at this point. And even then, he's positive, but he might not still be ahead of his lane, given that Ezreal is 3-0 at this point. So that's also a huge point in the game as well. And right now, I don't think the Shaco pick worked out for them, because he did not get his team into a place where they can continue to win this game.
And speaking of what went wrong, I'm pretty sure I found out what went wrong in the top lane. Singed is not flanking back towards his own tower. In fact, he just flung Tryndamere to safety away from his poison.
Yeah, that was sort of an odd choice. One thing I do note is the fact that Tryndamere doesn't have his ultimate up, so if he'd have flung him back into his own poison trail, there was absolutely nothing he could have done to stop that. So, very interesting thing, as you said right there, and Singed is probably just not playing this matchup correctly. As we know, Singed is a champion who wants to just sit back and farm, and at this point, given the fact that there has been 3 kills on him in the top lane, then I have to assume that he was taking too many early game trades, where instead of farming, he was trying to kill Tryndamere, and it just didn't work for him.
Absolutely. And the reason why Tryndamere's ultimate is down is because he went and tower dived through the second-tier turret chasing Singed. However, he had to burn it to get away from near death. So he got away, and instead of flinging him back towards the turret into his poison and probably taking a turret shot for a kill, he reversed it, and it caused Tryndamere to get away. And as you can see, he's back at full health without ever backing.
Yeah, and looking at some of the builds for a sec, we see the fact that Ezreal is actually just going for the straight-up blue Ezreal build instead of AP Ezreal. And I've actually seen a lot of people do this mid with Ezreal recently, and it's, once again, quite strong, and it doesn't really matter where you build him. He's still going to have that extreme kite potential, he's still going to have the cooldown reduction, and he's still going to have be just a very escapey champion. So I like the fact that he's still going for the blue Ezreal build, and it's really going to help his team out quite a bit. The only thing is, you know, they're starting to lack a little bit of magic damage on their team.
Absolutely, that's the risk you run whenever you put an AD in the mid lane, which is normally reserved for an AP champion. However, we see with the new meta of assassins mid or AD bruisers that can take down a carry with no issues, that's becoming the new meta, which is imbalancing the team now to 3 ADs versus the popular 3 AP when you put an AP in the top lane.
And there we go in the bottom lane. We see the fact that Nasus is going ahead and ganking, and this is one of the great aspects about Nasus as a jungler, is the fact that once he gets Wither on you, then you're slowed for an extremely long time, and even then it's Kog'Maw, so Kog'Maw doesn't really have any natural escapes. He basically just has his flash at the moment, and Barrier can sort of help him escape as well, but past that, he has no mobility. Once he gets slowed by Wither, it's basically over. He can't flash out of it, he can't dash out of it, he can't get away from trouble as quickly unless his flash is up, and as we saw in that engagement, it's not. It just has a very long cooldown.
Shaco definitely is able to play his own champion well, and it looks like he's actually starting to work with his teammates, bringing them back into the game. However, Shacos require a lot of early game aggression to gain control throughout the mid and late game, and if they do not have that early aggression and lead, they are going to fall off heavily. And so he gave the kills to himself rather than his team, and that actually hurt his team, but it helps him balance into the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, Shaco is really not a champion that scales well into the late game, so you can have a Shaco that's extremely fed, but coming into late game, he's not really going to do nearly as much as if, you know, he gave the kills to his other laners. Imagine a really fed Kog'Maw coming into this game 20 minutes into the game, compared to a fed Shaco coming into the game about 20 minutes into the game. That's a huge difference right there, where Shaco, he just doesn't have too much in terms of his teamfight potential late game. There is a little bit of disruption that he could do, but all in all, not nearly as much as some of his other teammates can do, such as Kog'Maw, who, as we know, is one of those big hyper carry AD carries.
Well, the good thing about Kog'Maw is he's one of those AD carries that can bounce back into the game, thus the hyper carry tag. If he is denied early game and even some of mid game, he bounces back pretty strong. So it's, to me personally, it's okay that Shaco is getting these kills. Yes, he falls off, that's why he needs them, but I agree, he falls off. It's not really a great choice for the late game. It would have been better to give it to Kog, but Kog does have the ability to bounce back, much like Vayne and Ashe.
And as we see right here as well, he's having a little bit of trouble keeping the mid-game control for his team as well. We see 3 towers down for the blue team, the mid one and 2 top towers, and Shaco really wasn't in a position to help all that much. Like we said, he's 5-1, he's pretty fed, he does a lot of damage, but he just can't control the team as well as he could be able to, and Draven is going to flash in for the kill in the bottom lane. It's pretty good, but unfortunately, it's not quite worth it, because actually it might be. With Lulu ultimate, very well timed there, but I was going to say it's not going to be worth it because Kog'Maw will pick up the kill with a Cathian surprise, and that's one of the things that, you know, I didn't think was going to be a very good idea, but it was great on Lulu to make sure that she, you know, went up there to ult him.
Yes, and that is what a good support needs to do. They need to be there for their carry, or their team for that matter, and have to be willing to sacrifice it all to make sure their team survives, because in most cases, it is worth it if the support dies, if your carries can live.
Yeah, in most cases it is. Now, one thing I really want to point out that's very odd, and I still don't really agree with is the fact that Leona has picked up a Thornmail as her first item. Now, there are a really high number of things where I see wrong with this. First of all, she has absolutely no wards in her inventory or out on the map. The only ward we see for the blue team is Tryndamere's ward up in the top lane near that tri-brush. Unfortunately, that's really not what you want to do as support. As support, you want to make sure your lane is warded at all times, and basically, we've been seeing so many Nasus ganks, and that's made possible by the fact that Leona's not warding, especially when you have a champion like Kog'Maw who's got, as I said before, no escapes. That's one of the things that you really need to be careful for ganks, because he can't escape those ganks, and without wards, you can't even see it coming.
I agree. It really is disappointing to see no wards. I
One
like
sec.
the Thorn. Okay, I'll continue. I like the Thornmail as a defensive choice for the team they're going against because it is Tryndamere. All of his damage comes from his auto attacks. Nasus does the same thing. His Siphon Strike is still considered a basic attack modifier. Ezreal does a lot with basic attacks, especially when they're blue build Ezreal like this, especially with the Mystic Shot also being sorry, I lost my train of thought. A auto attack modifier. Draven is nothing but auto attack, especially with the spinning axe, and Lulu not so much. But you're not really worried about her damage. So it comes out to be a great item choice, but the wards or the lack thereof is actually really detrimental to the team, as you said. And to carry on with these item builds, we actually get to see that the 80 carries for both teams have been pretty even in item builds, is a way to say it. They both had a BF sword, a Vamp Scepter, and a Doran's Blade for the longest amount of time. However, it looks like Draven picked up his Bloodthirster and is getting the stacks quite well, especially with the team's fights going in the red team's favor around the dragon like that. However, we're going to go ahead and see Kog'Maw trying to build into that Blade of the Ruined King very quickly, rather than probably a Bloodthirster that we're going to see with the BF sword and Vamp Scepter being picked up. Making sure we're still all on the call. We are.
Alright, and here we go. I am back in this point right now. And, you know, Tryndamere right there, I really think that he did use his ultimate, but he was in a position to get back to his tower. He could have been safe from that, but instead he decided to keep going for the Vyracure kill, which really wasn't, in my opinion, the best idea.
Red team has slain the dragon.
Sorry, I'm catching up on some of the chat that I was supposed to be reading.
Red team's turret has been destroyed.
Sorry, important things, I apologize. However, we are getting back into this, and we see Tryndamere also going for that Blade of the Ruined King. It's going to be very strong on him, especially with the extra attack speed to do all the damage he already does. It is immense. However, it also gives the ability to lifesteal and percentile damage, as well as an activated use that will just let him further stay alive, especially after he pops his ultimate. He will have all the health he needs with his Blood Rage and his Blade of the Ruined King.
Alright, here we see the fact that Ezreal did go behind the enemy line, and that's really something you can afford to do as a blue Ezreal. And right now, even though he's getting slowed a little bit, his Arcane Shift should be up fairly quickly, but honestly, I'm not sure why he waited so long to Arcane Shift at that point as well. I'm not sure if his cooldowns are that low at this point. He does have Glacial Shroud as well as Spirit of the Elder Lizard, so he should have a fairly large amount of cooldown reduction as well as landing those Qs. So I think in that point he might have ended up waiting a little bit too long, and past that he also has his flash up, so I really think he just sort of mistimed that and maybe underestimated the amount of damage that Kog'Maw does.
And that's also a possibility. Kog'Maw is definitely getting back into this game. His items are still the same as the last time when we mentioned them. However, his farm is increasing and so is his kills. When we mentioned his statistics and items earlier, he was 0 and 2. However, he has upgraded to 2, 3, and 4. So he is definitely getting some gold back into his pocket, as well as his farm is also doubled since then.
And so right now, the blue team, I like what they're doing right now. They're putting a little bit of pressure in the mid lane. Unfortunately, I think Singed might be pressing his luck just a little bit right here. Leona has gone around to maybe secure the kill, but once again, I don't really think that's a very good idea, and he's going back at this point, so there we go. But I want to see the blue team, I want to see them force more pressure around the map. I want to see them start grouping up as a 5 and pressuring some of these towers, like mid turret is exactly what they're doing right now, and that's so Draven affording to take a little bit of poke from Draven, and that's going to deter him from the tower. But yeah, like I said, that's what they want to do. Now, the red team, what they want to do to start closing out this game is almost the same thing. Now, the biggest difference is the fact that the blue team, they want to take some of these engagements while Shaco is split pushing, because that's really one of the late game things that Shaco can do really well, is he can split push, and the rest of his team can win these team fights, and we're seeing they're able to do that right now. We have Viger with a great stun, we have Leona to follow up with that stun lock, we have Singed as their big tank that disrupts everyone in the middle, and we also have Kog'Maw, who's their big damage near the end of the fight, and he's just putting out crit after crit, and he's able to get out a lot of damage on the team. So at the same time, you know, Shaco top lane, he's going to draw Tryndamere's attention up there, and the blue team, they can finish winning those 4v5s.
Can you call things right or what? As soon as you mentioned that they need to group up and force some fights, that's what happened. So definitely that's exactly what they need to do. They need to show their power in a group, because that is what their team comp is revolved around, is disrupting them with Sins, getting into the middle. Kog'Maw sitting in the back, especially with his W popped, he will have all the range he needs, plus the percentile damage to take down Nasus, who is known to be a health champion. So it actually really kills off the red team if Kog'Maw is allowed to sit in the back while Sins is in front line, Shaco's running distractions with his stealth and his clones, and of course Viger's giant ring of a stun.
In the red team, they're going to start wanting to push out top lane a little bit as well. It does them no use if, even if they can hold Shaco top lane for a bit, they really need Tryndamere here with them for these fights if they do plan on winning it. Otherwise, they would have to bank on a really nice initiation on their part. So I could afford to see a little bit more pushing out up near the top tower. However, the blue team, they're doing a great job as well. As soon as they finish that team fight, as soon as they're back up, they keep putting pressure on the mid lane, and that's this sort of play that really works well as a team. And even though they didn't do so well near the beginning of the game, this is really showing that they can come back into this game, and it's really a high level of play to see the fact that they are basically taking apart the red team at this moment.
And not only that, but their cohesion, as you said, is very strong, and you can see the team fights have gotten so much better. I don't know if that's because they're communicating even more, or they're actually grouping up. I can't tell without their chat box available. However, they are doing superb as an actual comp.
And there we go, it's a quadra kill, and it looks like there's the penta for Kog'Maw. So I would like to note his positioning in that fight was absolutely amazing right there. He stayed in the bushes for most of the fight, and even if he got low health, he just kept staying near the back of the line. He wanted to stay away from those high damage champions, and with Kog'Maw you can afford to do that because his W gives him a lot of range on his auto attacks, so you can stay near the edges of the fight and still put out all the damage you need, along with the extra percentage of maximum health damage that he gives with his W. So that's really something that I love to see from Kog'Maw, and the rest of his team did a fairly good job peeling for him, and that's really something that I miss out on seeing for a lot of teams that have a hyper carry for an AD carry, is we don't see enough peel for them. At this point, Singed is doing an amazing job right here, just completely disrupting, making sure no one gets to Kog'Maw, and that's one of the biggest things, and basically just completely drove Tryndamere back and actually ended up picking up the kill as well. Unfortunately now, Kog'Maw, or I was about to say Draven, but then I realized, because that's his name, but I realized there's a Draven on the other team, so. But Kog'Maw right there, he didn't have protection, and no matter how fed he is at this point, he got a Penta, he's got a Phantom Dancer as well as Infinity Edge, he still can't afford to fight some of these 1v3s, so he really needs the rest of his team to peel for him.
And that's something I want to mention on as well. 4 minutes ago, Kog was 2, 3, and 4. Look at him now, rocking in 11 kills, only 1 death added, and then, of course, 1 more assist. His items have escalated. He still hasn't finished that Blade of the Ruined King, but I don't think he's in a rush for that much more. He has his Infinity Edge completed. He has a Phantom Dancer completed versus Draven's Bloodthirster and Zeal. And he's also being forced to pick up some MR because of the damage from Kog'Maw's W. It does a lot of magic damage, but it's still percentile, so it still hurts a lot. Singe does a lot of magic damage, so does Shaco and Veigar and Leona. There is so much magic damage on the team that it is good to see that there is so much pressure coming from the team fights that your AD carry has to pick up some MR in order to survive the shortest bit.
Now we see the fact that both Leona and Singed have bought Thornmails, and once again, I don't really think that this was the best choice for them. I think they could have afforded to, in Leona's case, gone for the Randuin sooner, and that would be helping out her team quite a bit, or even someone on their team should be getting a Bulwark as well. That would be a great item, and even though there's not a lot of magic resist on the red team, it still gives your entire team a lot of resistances, and so that really helps you out no matter what. And that's something I would want them to see, and something that the red team should start looking into is a little bit more attack penetration or armor penetration, because right now I see basically none. They're not building towards that at all, and considering, like I said, the fact that 2 members of the blue team have Thornmails, that would be a very good item choice to go for.
Absolutely, and speaking of Randuins or other items rather than a Thornmail, I would love to see Singed with a Frozen Heart. It gives the armor value, and it gives mana, something Singed always loves, especially when you're stacking it along with a Tear of the Goddess to later turn into a Seraph Embrace much later in the game, assuming it lasts that long. So a Frozen Heart would be grand against the red team. Again, they are focused around auto attacks mainly, and you will slow that attack speed with the Frozen Heart.
And one thing I would like to see on Singed instead of the Thornmail, just building on this little pattern we have, is a Sunfire Cape, and that's something that would be really nice for him to have, because he's always in the back line of a fight. He's always trying to disrupt the enemy team as much as he can. As per Singed, that's what his champion is really supposed to do. So that really helps him put out even more damage for his team just by standing in the middle of a fight. And not only that, but it also gives him a little bit of health as well, which helps his champion out a little bit more than just the flat armor that Thornmail gives. And even though Thornmail returns some of the damage that the enemy team does, I really think that it would do him better to get a little bit more health instead.
Spot on, spot on. And speaking of all the damage everywhere, we see a Static Shiv and Tiamat on Shaco. It looks like this is an AD Shaco versus AP. AD Shaco carries over better, not saying it's best, but it carries better into the later game versus AP, who is really only good for his Jack in the Boxes or his 2 poison Shiv. Then again, it comes at a much later pace, and you are good for one thing versus auto attacks that can actually consistently put out damage.
Yeah, auto attacks can consistently put out damage, and that's one of the main reasons why Shaco end up building AD late game, and another reason for that is because he can easily split push. In AP, Shaco doesn't have nearly the split pushing power as an AD Shaco has, and that's really one of the biggest things that you can do with Shaco, is just be completely annoying during the game. You know, as Shaco, your early ganks are extremely powerful, so you want your team to be ahead near the early game. You want your team in a position where they can fight 4v5s, and if they are in that said position, then Shaco can basically afford to go top lane and say, alright, they can win 4v5s. I'll go top lane, because I'm not really going to be too much more of a help during the fight as I would be split pushing top lane and getting us more map control, win or lose the fight in the first place.
Also, an example to show how much these tables have turned from the early game, you mentioned earlier when we first started, a level 8 Tryndamere versus a level 5 Singed. What happened in that lane? Well, now if you look, it's a level 16 Tryndamere versus a 17, now 18 Singed. So that is what's happening in that lane. Then again, it's not the lane phase anymore, but that is just to show how much these tables have turned. The blue team is working so well together that they are actually out-leveling the red team, who had the advantage in the early game.
Yeah, Trinz also had a lot of indecisiveness during this game. Sometimes, we would see him during some fights split pushing top lane, and while he was split pushing top lane even, he was deciding whether or not to keep pushing or to fight off Shaco or do something of the sort, and now we're seeing him start split pushing top lane. However, the blue team is basically knocking on their own Nexus towers. So we're going to see Leona head back and see how long she can delay. So right now, the blue team, they should really look to make something happen at this point. Even though they don't have Leona, and that's a big source of CC, blue team is not really missing out on any of their damage. And if we can see Veigar catch someone out with a stun, that person will get killed, and they'll be able to force a great engagement off of that and perhaps push down some of the mid lane towers. But it looks like they're actually just going to go back and Leona actually almost soloing Tryndamere, and she's going to be able to keep him off the tower completely. That was a great play by her, and unfortunately, a little bit of lack of team communication for the blue team as Singed has already gone backwards. And I guess if he would have known that I was about to say Lunette, that Leona had this, then he would still be in there fighting with the blue team, and he would still be able to take these towers.
I agree. However, with the threat of Tryndamere no longer knocking on their tier 1 tower, oh, excuse me, tier 3, I get them reversed sometimes, versus the Nexus towers, you kind of have to weigh. You still have your damage, you have your 80 carry, and you have Shaco here, still knocking on those same Nexus turrets as we mentioned. And of course, here comes the rest of the team now pushing into the top lane with the cavalry known as Singed. Shaco's going to help them out. And then of course, you're going to have the rest of the blue team coming up to assist and probably make the final assault.
We're going to see one inhibitor, maybe a second inhibitor down compared to absolutely no inhibitor turrets down, and it looks like, oh, Draven is getting caught out right there a little bit, and that's something you really want to make sure you don't do as a Singed, is get a little bit too close, and I think Draven was just a little bit too hasty to get into that fight, saying, alright, this Kog'Maw needs to die, I'm going after him, I know I have the burst damage to take him down. Well, you might have the burst damage to take him down, but at the same time, running through a Singed is not one of the easiest things to do.
You can run through Singed? I don't think you can, especially with him having so much slow potential with his adhesive and his Rylays with his poison. You're not going to go through that Singed very easily.
And once again, we see a little bit of overstaying from some members of the blue team. However, I do like the fact that Kog'Maw is finishing up a little bit in terms of these structures near the top lane. So he's going to be doing his team a favor as well. And right now, I think the blue team, they just want to lock out this next team fight, make sure that they have as much power as they can when they knock down these Nexus turrets, and Kog'Maw is still just dropping back a little bit. The rest of the blue team doesn't look like they're actually wanting to go in for anything, but Leona calls for the tower, and there goes the tower. That is a good decision right there to make sure that they take the tower, and you know, even if Kog'Maw dies right here, and he will, that Nexus or that inhibitor tower is well worth it, especially since Red Team is in no position right now to push out and do anything about it. Baron is down. There's no way they can get the minions pushing all the way to the enemy base. That tower for the Kog'Maw trade was a very good trade.
I agree, and Nasus definitely knew how to place his skills. He knew the path Veigar was taking, and the damage from his AoE was just enough to pick off the no-health Veigar. So it was a good play rather than trying to burn a flash to get a melee kill in. Well, he doesn't have flash, excuse me. But you get my point. Instead of using some long cooldown, he decided to make use of his kit.
And there we go. Sick Motion is going to try to 1v4 them, I guess. There's not really too much he could have accomplished at that point. The inhibitor was basically full health the entire time. So not sure why he was in there in the first place. Just trying to pick up a kill or two, I suppose. But the blue team right now, Shaco is going to try to see if he can do anything. And that's really not what I want to see from him, especially since there's the Twin Shadows from Lulu. Can basically spot him out right there. And, you know, I think the blue team, they're better off just waiting for the rest of their team to come up so that they can fight a full-on engagement. Now, inversely, the red team, they really need to make sure that the Shaco doesn't backdoor their inhibitor. He's really the only one on the blue team in the enemy base. He's the only one who's able to make any action happen, and just letting that inhibitor slip would mean triple inhibitors, and that would be devastating for the red team. And as it stands, it's already extremely hard for them to get back into the game, and I'm really not seeing a way that they can get back into the game at this point, because no matter what, the blue team, they decide to fight top lane, they can send someone to split push bottom lane. There is so much control on the blue team side that there's really not much the red team can do unless the blue team makes a huge mistake and throws it.
And that huge mistake could very well be everyone trying to think they are the hero and solo pushing these turrets and inhibitors, because that is what will cause a throw, is when people think they are fed enough to do these things and they end up feeding the kills and the shutdowns to the opposite team.
Yeah, and good thing that the blue team's not really showing that they do have this mentality or anything like that. Kog'Maw is one of the more careful players of the blue team, and I really like to see that as well. He knows that his life is more valuable than a kill. He doesn't want to go in for a kill if it means he's going to die, because he's the person who can take down all the structures. If he picks up 1 or 2 kills and dies in the process, that's not nearly as powerful as him picking up a Nexus tower, and no kills in the process. So that's something that I really like to see from this Kog'Maw, that he's doing correctly, is basically playing that way. But unfortunately, not really have enough power to stop Tryndamere at that point, but at the same time, he got a lot of damage down to that tower, and he also took out an inhibitor, so it's worth it in that respect as well, and it's really hard for the red team to do anything about this. 3 members of their team are down, and the Nexus is completely bare.
Absolutely. And touching back onto the Kog'Maw and Tryndamere engagement, Tryndamere got so much damage in because he has a gap closer, whereas Kog'Maw has no mobility whatsoever, as you stated earlier on in the game. So it really, really showed the ability of a good gap closing kit versus a zero mobility kit.
Alright, taking a look at a little bit during the post-game stats, we see the fact, Veigar has Deathfire's Grasp, and that's really something that benefits him pretty well because he's basically a 100-0 champion. That's what he does. Takes someone out of the fight, and after that, he has to wait for his cooldowns a little bit, can throw out a stun every now and again, but ultimately he's not really going to put out as much damage as other AP carries will, and that's really something that plays to Veigar's kit, is Deathfire's Grasp, because he'll be able to burst down whoever it is, and it also gives him a little bit of cooldown reduction on top of that in order to make sure he puts out more stuns and, just gets as much crowd control and damage in as he can. So even though most champions don't build Deathfire's Grasp, Veigar is still one of those ones that do.
And something that surprises me, I went ahead, went to the graph, and went to damage delta champions. Holy crap, I did not expect it to be this way. Singed has the most damage, followed by Kog'Maw, then Shaco, then Veigar. What? Singed has the most damage delta champions.
Yeah, he was basically just standing in the back line of the fight. Poison was taking down on 3 or 4 members of the red team at a time, and that was really what made him do all that much damage, and it is actually a little bit surprising to see that he out-damaged Kog'Maw in terms of champions.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be getting into this next game momentarily. As per request from the chat, we're going to be watching PetMyFizz. As you guys know, he is a diamond player. He's currently smurfing in low elo, so you're going to get a kind of best of both worlds situation. Pro AD carry versus some pretty nubbly individuals, and I think we're going to have Azaraki and Jester casting this one, if Jester is actually here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Woo! Less work I have to do today.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. I actually am going to do
Luna.
some... What? What's up,
You
Asa?
haven't done that one thing in a while. Thing.
Yeah, I know. Would it make you happy if I did?
I don't know. I think you got to wait for good timing for it as well.
Exactly.
It's got to be at a great time. But I just want to make sure that you haven't forgotten about it.
No, I haven't forgotten. Don't worry. Oh, don't worry. Anyways, we're just about out of the delay. We've got another 20 seconds. I'll go ahead and give you guys the team rundowns right now. We've got a jungle gangplank, Kassadin, Lux support, Ezreal AD carry, and Zac top lane. Jungle fiddle, Maokai support, Kennen mid, Jace top, and Miss Fortune. So, some really weird picks coming out here. Have fun.
These are some things that I haven't seen in a really long time. I really have to say. Alright, so just gonna get in the game right now. Now I can't see the screen on stream or anything like that because it's loading into the game for her. It's loading into the game on me, so I'm kind of blind right now. But oh hey, we could blindcast. That would work as well.
Radiocast, yeah.
Alright, so now that I'm actually in the loading screen, we can take a look at some of these champions. So 3 things standing out to me already, sort of 4 things actually. We have a support Maokai, jungle Fiddlesticks, jungle Gangplank, and support Lux. Now support Lux is probably the one that we're most used to, especially near the end of Season 2. She became extremely popular, but in this part, at this point in the meta, if you get your hands on Lux, she's much more useful as a mid lane champion, so you don't really see her supporting all that much anymore. And past that, we see both jungle Fiddlesticks and jungle Gangplank. I think these two are very, very old very, very old junglers near early season or earlier mid-season 2 even.
Well, you don't really see that many AP junglers these days because of their reliance on blue initially. The more stigma is to put blue in their mid lane, but these days with the Season 3 AD Bruiser mid, you can actually kind of get away with that somewhat a little bit easier these days. So Fiddlesticks with a smite in the jungle, I mean, it's not going to be terrible. He's not going to give off that first blue, maybe not even going to give off that second blue. Of course, if we get some counter jungling in and they get both, all's the better. But yeah, Gangplank, he definitely goes back more towards the Season 1 metas, especially since he has that global ult he can bring to the table. It doesn't actually have to be in any lane to help it out. It has a little bit of that global pressure, and that's what we see more and more bans these days. You know, Shen getting banned, Twisted Fate getting banned. Those global comps are things that people just don't want to deal with, but a lot of people forget about the little old Gangplank. He's just not as threatening as the others.
Yeah, especially near the early game in terms of his ganks. One thing that Gangplank sort of lacks is an amount of CC, because he does have his poison, which procs on his auto attacks as well as parley, but it's not substantial enough to be a good enough slow to use for a gank. Now, that being said, one thing that I really like about the blue team's team comp is that the lanes themselves have a pretty good deal of CC. Obviously, we have Zac in the top lane, who's basically a CC machine, and that's really going to complement Gangplank well, because Gangplank can put out a good amount of damage in a gank. He just needs that CC. So once he gets there, once he gets close enough, and Zac will provide that, he can gank. In the bottom lane, we also have Lux with her Snare as well as Lucent Singularity. We have two forms of CC there, two great forms of CC, by the way, and Gangplank is going to be able to make use of that to gap close as well and put out his damage.
Now, again, like part of the new meta for Season 3 for junglers, just to finish up that thought, is gap closers. You see things like Lee Sin, gap closer, Jarvan, gap closer. You see Jarvan banned out quite a bit as well. Pantheon, you know, a little bit of a gap closer, but he's like a sleeper OP here for Season 3. That's something that really Gangplank doesn't have. He can speed up, but he doesn't have that gap closer. So in terms when it comes to ganks there, you really have to work with your teammate and use that boost morale just to get that extra speed. Of course, he does have the ultimate, the global comp there, but again, you know, Fiddlesticks, he suffers the same issue pre-6, and even then it's kind of hit or miss with his gap closer there for the ganks. Of course, if he can get off the party time and get off of fear, it's very likely going to be a dead enemy, whoever you're going to be ganking. But of course, again, a little bit of power there from Fiddle. As you see, he immediately destroys that blue at 210. Doesn't really even need any help. Drain tanking is extremely safe for the entire jungle, if not for ganking.
It is, in fact, extremely safe. It looks like we might be seeing him go for an invade as well. Obviously, we know the fact that he has a very short clear time on blue buff, so we might be seeing him actually wait in this bush for red buff, or he's actually going to go for a gank in the bottom lane. So an early gank on him would be pretty great right now. He did take Dark Wind, so he doesn't have Terrify. That's going to be something that hurts him a little bit. However, the barrier from Ezreal is going to be able to keep him safe from that gank. But, you know, they did pop the barrier, they did pop the flash, so it's overall a very good gank right there, even if he doesn't have Terrify.
Now, if you do come in for those ganks and you get off, you know, maybe not a kill, but you do enable a summoner spell or two. For example, in this case, Pet My Fizz, you know, already having to use out that barrier, having to use that flash. That's very powerful for the next gank because they have such long cooldowns. So I think that actually did pay off. As you can see, we have Gangplank going to be heading down towards the bottom lanes. They're saying, guys, we got these summoners are now blown. And we got to do something about that. We need to put up this pressure because they're getting shoved right into tower, and that's not the place that they want to be.
Yeah, great wording by the red team as well, making sure that they know, all right, we're pushing ahead. We definitely don't want to gank at this point, especially since we got our own early gank. Let's make sure we get a ward out here. And basically, Gangplank couldn't make action happen in the bot lane because of that ward, so I'd like to applaud that ward coverage right there. And the fact that Ezreal is missing his summoner spells actually means quite a bit in this lane, especially considering we look at Maokai and Misfortune. They've got a ton of burst damage in their kit, and if you don't have a barrier to survive that, then it's going to be really hard to do so. And one cool thing about Maokai is the fact that his Twisted Advance basically snares once he gets to you. So even if Ezreal decides to Arcane Shift away, he'll still be right there. Now, to Ezreal's advantage, he might be able to kite Maokai under the tower at that point, but obviously he had to go back. He couldn't pull any of those plays when he's only got 100 or 200 health because of an easy Twisted Advance, Arcane Smash, double up follow-up, and he would be dead.
And that is kind of the strength as well as the weakness of a Maokai. Usually we would see him in the jungle, and then he could come as early as level 3 for tower ganks or tower, especially if you're 2-on-1, because now all of a sudden you're 3-on-1, and that twisted advance is guaranteed to land. Doesn't matter if you flash or not, if you use an escape mechanism or not. So it is a strength in the terms that it will land, but it also can be baited out, it can be kited out, and that is, of course, where the weakness does lie as well. And you can see the fear coming in, the silence coming in here mid, not going to be quite enough to push him off initially, but then as soon as they just realized that that was warded, yeah, the fear, and then Kennen was able to finish him off. So we don't have those gap closers, but we still have a lot of power behind Fiddlesticks. And again, after level 6, he will have that gap closer ability. We're going to have to see if we can use it well, though.
You know, a weird thing is that Kassadin didn't actually pick on sort of a tell from Kennen there. Now, Kennen, as a mid lane champion against someone like Kassadin, he's going to want to stay at a distance. If you get close to Kassadin, then you're taking a lot of free harass, you're eating a Force Pulse as well as a Null Sphere, and that's a lot of damage you don't want to take. So generally, Kennen in the mid lane, especially in the early game, he's going to want to keep his distance a bit and just make sure he pokes out, farms, harasses, does all that stuff out of reach of Kassadin. But in there, he went in for a little bit more harass. He wanted to get Kassadin low as possible so that when the gank came, it would help him out. And he didn't really care if he got taken down low himself, and that should have been something that Kassadin would pick up on.
Now, I'm looking at the runes and masteries of these guys, but Apokrita there, the Maokai in question, he has crit damage as well as attack damage. I'm curious to see what that build will end up being in the long run, because he's not doing anything in AP at all, or tankiness. He's 6-0-24 to boot.
Yeah, generally we see the fact that Maokai normally wants to build tanky through the entire game. Twisted Advance, it basically makes it impossible to CC people without being in the middle of a fight. And if we think about it, Maokai has absolutely no CC he can use without being in the middle of a fight. So you want him to be tanky, you want him to be able to survive once he jumps in, but having crit, having attack damage, I'm really interested to see what this turns into.
And again, like 0 in defensive as well. He's 24 points in the utility. So the utility will give him a little bit of spell vamp, the lifesteal. Not actually too sure if that is something he is running though, but no, actually he doesn't have that. So he doesn't have the lifesteal or the spell vamp mastery, but he will have a lot of cooldowns, a lot of movement speed afforded to him. It's just odd to see at this point, a non-defensive support Maokai. It's very atypical.
So we talked a little bit about what Kennen wants to do in the mid lane, but going on to what Kassadin wants to do in the mid lane is certainly different at this point. And as we saw, he's been taking a lot of free harass from Kennen, and that's really something you don't want to do as Maokai, is basically get too close. Especially now that he's behind in the lane, he doesn't want to be the one to go up. He doesn't want to get farm if it means bringing him too close to Kennen, because Kennen can easily pull off 3 stun procs and get him stunned, put down a lot of early damage. And considering the fact that Kennen is already building towards his Haunting Guise, he's already got quite a bit of damage as well as the Ruby Crystal for a little bit of health on top of that. He's already got that first kill. It was first blood, so he's pretty far ahead in the lane. I'm really surprised to see that Kassadin didn't just play it a little bit safer. At this point, he wants to even, at this point, farm with his Q a little bit, and that's something that'll give him a little bit of range, make sure he doesn't have to walk up and melee the minions to get the last hits.
Kennen getting ahead with that first blood. I mean, he is about 400 gold ahead, and he's going to use that extra gold advantage. He's going to come back with the boots as well as some wards. So he's not going to go straight into just getting that Haunting Guise just to say that he has it at an 8-minute mark. He's going to play it safe, get off those wards. He does realize that the enemies do have a gangplank. Again, like with Kassadin coming in with a gangplank, not only are you going to get raised morale and the ship cannon, but of course you're also going to get the Rift Walk on top of you, and it's almost impossible to run away from that Kassadin. So putting out the wards, making sure he doesn't get ganked. As you can see, he already put out the 2 before, but those are actually Kassadin's wards. So he's going to match the wards at this point. And then, as you said, I mean, he's already ahead. What do you do when you're ahead? Just get more ahead. So if he can not get ganked and just keep farming up, he can maintain that gold lead, which means he can hopefully get an item lead later.
They haven't really touched on the top lane all that much so far, and it's really a fairly even matchup in the top lane. No kills, no assists, and we're seeing basically 6 farm difference, so that's not really much at all. I like the fact that Zac is going for basically a build to counter the lane. He's going for a Chain Vest as well as Warden's Mail. That's giving him a ton of armor. Right now, let's check right now. he's sitting at 150 armor, and that's going to help him quite a bit against Jason. Right now we're seeing he's able to poke Jace under tower. That armor is going to help negate some of the damage from tower hits as well, so it's going to help him quite a bit, especially considering that Jace has not finished his Brutalizer yet, which once he does, he's going to start doing a little bit more damage. He's going to have that armor penetration as well as cooldown reduction, but at the moment Zac is going to be winning most of these trades, and right there, not quite winning that trade, however. He's just going a little bit too far, saying, all right, I know I'm ahead, my build is pretty awesome, it makes sure that I don't take that much damage, but you don't want to get cocky, and that's one of the things that he really did there, was just basically stay too close. Jace was able to use his entire burst.
And that's actually been the story ever since the first creeps came in. Zac is playing really, really gutsy just to get the creeps, but he's not exactly actually winning these trades yet. Despite all his armor, he just can't really actually match that damage output yet. Once he gets a little bit of oomph behind him, he's going to be far ahead, especially if he can keep up with those creeps, as he said. But so far, he's actually gone back more often than Jace at this point, and Jace is kind of still struggling for that CS. Now, we do got a Dragon going down. It is blind, no wards, a little bit of a misstep there from Blue, especially with junglers like Fiddlesticks, junglers like Nunu. They can very safely take those early objectives. You got to keep that in mind, and you got to get those early wards out.
Yeah, that's really a great advantage of running Fiddlesticks. As you said, Nunu, even Shaco, who at level 6 can use his clones to do a lot as well. But Cannon just underestimating the damage right there that would be put out, as well as forgetting the fact that Gangplank does have the ultimate. He did trade a kill for kill. It's going to help him out a little bit, but at the same time, actually, kill for an assist. Khazad didn't actually get the kill there, so that's one thing that we have to consider. So that actually plays towards Kennen quite well, actually. He's going to be able to continue snowballing that lane, and even though he gave a kill to Gangplank, it's not really nearly as substantial as the kill on Kennen. So Kennen, he's got his hunting guys at this point, building another amplifying tome. Once he gets the Liandry's, he's going to be doing quite a bit of damage, especially proccing his ultimate, proccing Liandry's on multiple people. It's going to be a very good showing.
Actually, I just re-round and I did look at that. It was 0-1-0 Kassadin. Now he's 0-2-1, so he did get that assist out of it, which means that Gangplank got the kill, Kassadin got the assist, and that's more combined gold right there than the kill that we got off from Kennen. So actually the trade did work out a little bit better there from Blue. I mean, it doesn't help Kassadin in terms of the creeps, but at least he did get that assist gold, so it was like a 2-for-1 scenario in terms of who did receive cash out of that.
One thing I would like to see a little bit more from Kassadin is a little bit more direction in his build. You know, he's got the components for a Chalice. He's got two amplifying tones, but he doesn't have any finished tier 2 items. He's only got those tier 1, first buy items, where I would really like to see, instead of one of the amplifying tomes, go right for his Chalice of Harmony. That's going to help him survive in this lane a lot more, because he needs mana regen. That's something that, even if you can use your Force Blade, I believe it's called, or Voidstone, right? I think no Netherblade. Right, I had it right there.
Voidstone's a whole different game.
Voidstone's his passive. There we go. So he's going to be using his Netherblade for a little bit of regen, but once again, that requires you to get up close. That requires you to start auto-attacking, and that's something that you don't always feel comfortable doing as Kassadin, especially against a Kennen. So would really like to see a Chalice of Harmony instead of one of the amplifying tomes.
And usually when it is an AP versus AP, you will see, runes and masteries set up with a little bit of magic resist. You will usually see a Chalice or an Abyssal, something that will add to your offense as well as your defense. The top lane, though, we did get that Fiddle off gank. Bottom lane, the Twisted Advance going in. A little bit of damage being traded out. Mid lane also trading out as well. But Gortanish, that top lane, man, he just plays so close to the wire with his Zac. Now, of course, Zac with the passive can play a little bit more gutsy, especially since he is just going to explode and try to recombine. If he can die under his tower, it's not really that bad an idea, because he just simply will recover, and most of the time, especially like before the 20-minute mark, you won't see those kind of tower dives, especially with the comp like this. Like Fiddlesticks isn't exactly tanky, you're not going to tower dive that. Jace could go in, but he might risk dying, and he doesn't want to get any farther behind than he is. And something I was talking about earlier about those blues going back and forth is that Fiddlesticks has actually not given a blue off to Kennen yet, whereas we have actually given a blue off to Kassadin once. So again, AP jungler is kind of needy on those blues.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of people like to say that isn't necessarily true is that, Kennen uses energy. He doesn't really need the blue buff at all. But two things you gotta consider actually is that blue buff helps with energy regen, and it also helps with cooldown reduction. Two things that Kennen really works well with. If you get the cooldown reduction on Kennen, think about it. You got so many more abilities. You can throw out shurikens every second or two. It's going to help him poke quite a bit, as well as help him escape as well, because if you spend all of your energy poking, you're not going to have too much energy, you're not going to be able to lightning rush away. So at that point, if he has the energy regen, he's not going to have to worry about that as much, and he'll be able to poke more without worrying about giving up that escape.
I've actually been looking at this shenanigans going on top lane, but if you look, Gortanish is actually nowhere near anywhere that he has really any say to it. DJ Kimbo, or D Kimbo there, has tried to set up this gank with Fiddlesticks. It's just not working out whatsoever. Finally, when Kennen comes up, I mean, they're finally able to take him down. There's that passive. So again, Gortanish wasn't really that concerned, and even now, this early game, like, he can almost recombine with 3 of them on top of him. So yeah, top lane, if you're going to be top lane, it's always good to get a ward bush or a bush ward out here, just like what we have here on Team Red. Usually, good idea to get it if you're Team Blue as well, because they can sneak up on you. And you always got to be very careful when you do push through the top lane as well, because the farther and farther you get out, you do got those 2 avenues of getting ambushed, and that's kind of what happened here. It was very sloppy, but it was sort of what happened. Kassadin, however, same idea does apply the other way, of course.
Yeah, and Kassadin, he's a little on the run right here from Fiddlesticks, but once that ultimate wears off, doesn't really have too much to worry about. He's just going to go ahead and Rift Walk away. But Kennen's coming up as well. He's in a little bit of a sticky situation. Now, here's the part where Gangplank comes in. However, jungle Gangplank, he doesn't really have too much stopping power. He doesn't have anything to, say, prevent Kennen from killing him right there. He had to use his oranges for the stun, and even then he was still taking so much damage on top of that. So that's really one other reason why Gangplank isn't really used quite as often. And he's got an Varus Blade, but he doesn't really have too much in terms of tankiness. He's got a Giant's Belt, but I would really like to see a little bit more magic resist or even armor if he decides to gank top lane a little bit more. But as Gangplank, I really think that tank is the way to go.
So you're very much a fan of a tank plank then?
Yes, a tank plank. But at the same time, if you build tank plank, he's not quite as tanky. Well, he does get very tanky, but there's nothing that really forces you to focus him. But if you go for a damage Gangplank, then you focus him for half a second and he dies. He's really squishy at that point. So that's really one of the reasons why he's not too used right now.
Well, the thing about a Gangplank is you can go tank. In this case, it looks like he's going to go for a mixture. But usually for an early game, especially for a jungle, picking up that Avarice Blade, not a bad idea whatsoever. And that actually goes really well with those banned TFs, because you're going to get a lot of cash, not only from killing things with Parley, but the Avarice Blade, the gold pretend it gives, and then, if you do have a TF, the TF as well. But in terms of the magic resist, like, the only real magic resist he has to worry about in these team fights is going to be the combo of Kennen as well as Fiddlesticks. And this point, it's really not that much of an issue, because it is early game. Later, though, yeah, if he picks up some magic resist, he'll be in a good spot. But the way that you make him force is you use the passive. You really got to, position your cannons well for the slows, the AoE, as well as your Parley. It's going to affect the Grog-soaked Blade, which is going to slow you down, do a dot, and then on top of things, with the Avarice, usually what you'll see is a static Shiv. So if you ignore the Gangplank, even if he does go tanky, the static Shivs and the Grog-soaked Blades and the slows are just going to start adding up over time. And then as soon as you do focus him, he just eats oranges and it's K.
Right, so going back to revisiting Maokai in the bottom lane with his crit as well as AD runes, we see that he's built a Kaj's Lucky Pick, or Cage's Lucky Pick. I'm never quite
Cages.
sure how to pronounce that. Yeah,
Officially 100% Cages.
Cages. All right, so Cage's Lucky Pick. So he is going a little bit towards the AP rune. He also has a mana manipulator, so possibly going for a Shard of True Ice there. But at the same time, I believe that's a Shard of True Ice. Yes, the Shard of True Ice.
If we're talking about Maokai, then yes.
Yes. All right, so he's going for that, getting a little bit of supporty items. However, maybe he just ended up taking the wrong runes and masteries, but he's not really building towards his runes and masteries. I don't really see how that crit and attack damage could have helped him all that much in the early game. It's not like he's a ranged support where he can throw out one every now and again, throw out an auto attack, and hope he gets a crit or anything like that. So, perhaps just a little mishap on his part.
Just saw this excellent gank going down up top. Kennen coming up there. Now, we have a lot of armor on Zac. Doesn't matter against Kennen in this case, and you see him absolutely melt. So you can even see them trying to do some playful banter in the ult chat. It's just like, why do you have so much armor? And Zac saying, I'm tired of dying in ranks, which is, good. I mean, he's building armor. He's responding to his lane. It's Jace. Jace does a lot of physical damage. Doesn't do a lick of good when Kennen comes to town. But again, wards are your friends. We did have a ward in the try. Unfortunately, he did not have one there in the bush. And again, just something, a repeated weakness we're seeing here from Gordonish.
Yeah, we see a lot of these sort of ward mishaps that people put out. It's basically they'll ward one place, think they're safe, but they won't have complete and total ward coverage, or they'll miss a spot, or perhaps mistime their wards, basically thinking for too long that they're covered by wards, and the ward runs out and they don't even notice, or something of the sort. So that's something that a lot of people don't tend to keep up with very well.
Sorry, a little bit of a misstep there. Gangplank actually ended up with the blue. Didn't give it off to Kennen. So Kassadin. Yeah, Grogsook Blade, man.
Yep, there you go. It looks like Pet My Fizz, he's going to try to do something against this dragon. So, at the moment, they do have a little bit of a lead, given that Kennen's not here. So that's one of the major team fighters from the red team out of the fight. And past that, good attempt at a steal. Almost got it. However,
I don't think it hit the actual dragon.
Did it? I'm not sure. Yeah,
I think
it should have done something at that point. Maybe the smite came right before the laser did. But I think the blue team, they should have capitalized on that a little bit sooner. They should have initiated a little sooner. They have Zac. Elastic Slingshot is a very good gap close, and on top of that, they have Ezreal's Arcane Shift. They have Rift Walk from Kassadin. There are so many ways that the other members of the blue team could catch up to the Zac initiation that I really think they should have gone a little bit sooner in order to close out that fight a little bit more convincingly, because right now, they lost 2 members of their team. It's not really the best team fight, but all in all, it did go out in their favor.
And an ace coming out of that. I'm just actually going to rewind. So I want to look at this dragon. Yeah, so I'm looking at the dragon.
Take a look at what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course it is just Fiddlesticks. Fiddlesticks does have Smite coming up, I think. I'm looking at that. Yeah, no, it's actually going to be down for 20 seconds, so he can't smite this. Ezreal didn't actually hit it with his laser, and it didn't look like the laser actually affected it either from Lux. So you got those double, long-range attacks, didn't actually do anything. A little bit laughing in all chat, but then they decided to fight in the bush. And yeah, unfortunately, Zac's mobility, Kassadin's mobility, the long range of both the blue build Ezreal, as well as Lux, just absolutely destroyed them. I really do tell my teams when I'm playing in more serious games, never ever fight in the jungle unless you have wards everywhere, because more often than not, they just don't work out.
Alright, so we see, we're talking about Blue Ezreal just a little bit. Now, he went for the Iceborne Gauntlet first, which is something that you don't normally see on a blue build Ezreal, because, let's face it, Blessing of the Elder Lizard, 2,000 gold. It gives you such amazing stats for that 2,000 gold. And I can see a little bit of a reason why he's going for the Iceborne Gauntlet first. I still would have rather seen the Blessing of the Elder Lizard, but let's go on to why he got it first. Possibilities for that are because he wants the mobility, he wants the kite potential. The red team, most of their members can be pretty easily kited. We don't have a lot of straight up dashes, we don't have a lot of flashes, we don't have a lot of teleports or anything of that sort for the red team. We have our Twisted Advance as well as the ultimate from Kennen, but past that they're all speed boosts and just relying on base movement speed, so I can see why he wanted to do that. And even odder, we also see the fact that he's gone for a Last Whisper, so not really too much sticking to the normal item progression for Blue Ezreal. What do you think of this?
Typically, you will see the Spirit Lizard first, or the Elder. Yeah. No, I think it's Spirit of the
Elder Lizard.
I'm looking at Elder Lizard, and it's 45 attack damage on. Yeah, that's right. Okay, my bad. I don't know why I blanked on that, but yeah, usually you see that first simply because dragon control. You have two junglers, or effectively because you have the 2 Spirit Stones, and your ADC is typically going to be in the bottom lane anyway. So as soon as you win out that trade, you can immediately go for the dragon. So going for a fist first, I don't think we've set a dragon yet for the blue team.
Yeah, that's true. The red team, they've had complete control over it. Not enough wards for the blue team. And they actually snuck that first one with only Misfortune and Fiddlesticks, so that was a great play by them. The second one, I think the second, either second or third, but this past one we saw was contested, but they didn't actually force the engagement. They weren't the ones to start taking the dragon, so that's a great point that you bring up. So going back to the top lane a little bit, we see the fact that Zac has built a Randuin's Omen, giving him a lot of health as well as armor, so he's going to be really tanky against the champions like Jace as well as Misfortune, so he's really building towards his lane opponent. Kennen, however, he's got 6 kills. He's doing quite a bit of damage himself.
Yeah, 6'4" Kennen. He not only the most kills, but the most deaths. That's something to keep in mind as well. I mean, sure, you might have this awesome KD ratio, but if you didn't win at the end of it, then what was the point? So he's getting in there. That's, again, another weakness of Kennen. With the Slicing Maelstrom, he has to get right up close and personal with this team. This isn't exactly a team that you have the easiest time getting up close and personal with. I mean, you got the movement buff coming out of Gangplank, not only the slow, Rift Walk coming out of Kassadin, but not the bubbles, but the snares coming out from Lux. Of course, blue buff Ezreal is extremely hard to kind of get down, especially blue build Ezreal as well. And then Zac has a slingshot, so Kennen really has to, fight his battles. Now, with the last ace, he wasn't exactly there either. So having a good knowledge of your team could go a long way, especially as the fight gets later and later. You don't want to end up in positions where you're 4v5ing, 3v5ing, and because then the 3 are typically going to lose, and then the remaining 2 just can't fight on their behalf by the end of it, and you end up losing objectives. So yes, he might have the most kills, but he also has the most deaths. Tells me though that he's getting in there. He's trying to be that team player. Not necessarily always going to work out. For example, Maokai right there getting caught out. Now it's 5-on-4. Kind of harder to fight.
Yeah, just a little bit. But we do have Pet My Fizz. He's making good use of the fact that he's built his Iceborne Gauntlet near the first and basically just kiting around some of these fights. One thing, we know Kennen as build Azonias on Kennen. This team, however, for the blue team, might not actually warrant that too much because consider, as you said, you run into a fight, you Zonias. Everyone on the blue team has some sort of ability that allows them to reposition except for Lux. We even have Raise Morale by Gangplank, which helps him out, and Gangplank also has, as we know, the oranges, those troll oranges that allow him to cleanse out of basically everything. So that's actually quite a bit of mobility that they can use against Kennen. So by building Azonias, what he's basically doing is he's basically telling his team, alright, you need to keep them inside my ultimate. I can't do this alone like I normally can through most team comps. We're going to have to use all of our team to our advantage.
And that would have been much easier last fight had Maokai actually been around. I mean, if you look at the state of the CC, all you really have is Fear and Maokai. That's really about it. That's all you can really do to stop people. So last fight, we had Fiddlesticks. He threw out the party time. We had the Slicing Maelstrom. They weren't able to overlap. As I said, we can't get people into those AoEs or keep them in there. And it was a 5-on-4. So it's really not too much of a surprise that Red Team did lose out that last fight. But again, the ults didn't stack up. The gap closer from Fiddle didn't actually work out that well. He tried to go on Gangplank, not who he wants to because oranges. And yeah, the comp from Red is kind of slowly falling apart here. And you can see it in terms of the kills, the gold, the towers. Actually, the towers are actually tied up, but in terms of the gold, even with 2 dragons on their side, they're still behind.
Yeah, their team fights are really going in favor of the blue team, and as you said, it's more of a team comp sort of thing where the red team, they just don't have enough CC to keep the blue team in the comp, and that's really part of the reason why a high mobility comp would work pretty well against the straight up AoE ult stack comp that the red team is going for right now. And we could be seeing a little bit more CC. We could potentially have even, Sona support who has the great crescendo. We could see Thresh support. Unfortunately, we didn't actually see who got banned, so we can't call some of these picks, but those are 2 champions that would really, I think, complement the rest of their team comp better than Maokai would. And with the amount of high mobility that the blue team has, I'm not really seeing Maokai's ultimate being used to its fullest potential either. His own team doesn't want to be grouped together either, so they want to be trying to force as much as they can. They're going to be chasing around the blue team because the blue team's really kiteable, or really kitey. So I don't think Maokai was really the best support pick in this occasion.
Now, as you said, we didn't see the picks and bans. Might have been an accident, might have been a troll pick. Looking at his runes of master 6024, I don't know who does that, but as well looking at the runes that he's using, it makes no sense, to be honest. Like, there's no gold per 10, there's no armor, there's no magic resistance, there's no movement speed, nothing that you typically do see on a support. He has crit damage and attack damage, not crit chance, crit damage. Yeah, I don't really know how to read it. So, but yeah, they haven't really been able to utilize the 3. Right here, though, was a really good application. We had the Fiddlesticks going, we had the Slicing Maelstrom come out, the Vengeful Maelstrom going off as well. So, and they got a kill out of it. So, hey, already they've won that fight, unless, of course, they screwed up from here on out.
Yeah, they could very well do it. Kassadin is still just waiting in the wings. He's going to actually take out Jace, but looks like he's going to fall right there. So one of the biggest things that the red team did correctly in that team fight was basically take out Ezreal. That's really what helped them win that fight, and they were able to stun lock him. They were able to put out a lot of damage, especially with bullet time, and even though we saw 3 or 4 ultimates used primarily hitting only Ezreal, they still ended up winning that fight because Ezreal is their biggest damage dealer right now. We have Ezreal and Lux, or sorry, not Lux, Ezreal and Kassadin. Lux at the moment is building support. She doesn't have as much AP as most others do, even though she's building her way there. She's got a needlessly large rod, but she doesn't do all that much damage. And the other 2 members of the team are tanky. So once you take Ezreal out of the fight, there's really not enough follow-up damage for the blue team to get back into it. So he just got a little bit caught out right there, but to the credit of red team, they caught him out. They have a lot of gap closers. They have Maokai, who's extremely good at catching people out.
Yes, Maokai, Jace by themselves should be able to just gap close on top of him, but the question is, can they lock him down? Because, of course, we are going to have an Arcane Shift come out immediately after any kind of jump from Ezreal. But yes, taking him out of the equation, they did trade out 3 for 1. Yes, they did lose out a kill to Kassadin, but a nice shuriken to the back was able to take him down. And looking at the state of the items, the state of the gold, like that, all of a sudden, that 3,000 gold difference, gone. One fight in a tower, or sorry, one fight in a dragon. And a tower, actually, if you look at it, 4-3 now, was able to not only tie up the gold, but put them just slightly ahead, which means that this game is far from over at the 30-minute mark, and that's good news for Red, because up to that point, they'd been losing fight after fight after fight.
They might be able to take this back into their favor, but for the blue team, I really want to see them put a little bit more pressure on the game. Right now, we're just seeing them, they're sort of staying in their own half of the jungle, and even though, they're not far enough ahead to basically say, all right, we're taking this tower down and there's nothing you can do about it. They're not far enough ahead to do that, but at the same time, they should be keeping as many lanes pushed out as possible. They should be aggressively warding. They want to get more wards out, certainly more wards out than this, and it looks like they're catching Kassadin out this time. Unfortunately, it's not Ezreal yet, but he might be caught out next. But Kassadin is going to be down for the next fight, so the red team has quite a bit of time where they can use to push their advantage, especially since Zac is in the top lane. I want to see them do something with this advantage they have.
Well, it is coming to that point where the death timers are going to start kicking in. So if you can, force these fights, 3-on-1, 4-on-1, you get themselves the kill, you're going to have a nice window of opportunity in order to do something. Now, whether they do the right thing or not, it's really going to come down to the state of the team. But look at that immense poke coming in to mid. Friendship's magic, all of a sudden down half health. She does not really rock any kind of defensive capabilities at this point. So any kind of poke that they can do here is going to be favorable to them. Unfortunately, they're trying to poke in 3-on-3, and I really don't know why Maokai decided to leave. Of course, he went top to defend, which is good, but Miss Fortune's also split pushing, and that didn't actually work out for them in that regard.
Yeah, when you have a 4v3 or even a 5v3, if Maokai would have stayed as well, then you can easily pressure this turret.
Right.
And going into the base, getting an inhibitor turret is huge. It's one of the biggest objectives of the game, and so I'm really wondering why they didn't take the advantage to pressure that even more at that point. And right now we're even seeing them getting caught out little by little, the blue team catching a little bit of the reds out, although they were able to pick up a kill top lane. But blue team, Pet My Fizz getting back into this. He's taking kills himself, so all in all, really big mistake by the red team. Now Ezreal is alive and in the top lane. His minions are almost there. He can take down this top tower if he wanted.
So instead of 5 clumping and getting in for that inhibitor tower, they all kind of split apart. We have multiple deaths on both sides now, 25-18, and again, the gold is still sort of fluctuating, but in terms of everything, if they had traded this top tower for an inhibitor tower and possibly even an inhibitor, 5-on-3, you might even get a few kills out of that. That would have been huge, but instead they fragmented and they did different fights on different lanes, and they ended up losing the tower anyways. So not the best of trades. Definitely could have seen a bit better there, but it is Pet My Fizz. I think he was the star that Lunette said that we are watching. So, guys, if you kill him, go assault the tower. Go get an objective. Don't splinter and defend. Get off these favorable trades.
Unfortunately, I don't know if Miss Fortune is going to be able to win this fight, but actually Pet My Fizz backing off. Not sure if that was the best idea to just completely back off of that fight. He might have actually been able to take Miss Fortune on if he'd just arcane shifted out of the Make It Rain and just threw out a couple of Qs and kited her around. So she's really easily kited by someone like Ezreal because, she has Strut, gives her movement speed, but if she takes damage, if you are able to hit her with your Q, then that's negated. She can't chase you nearly as quickly as she normally would be able to. So I think Ezreal could have played that better by playing the kite game instead of this straight-up runaway game.
The problem there, though, was if you look at just the auto attack damages coming out of Miss Fortune, not only does she have 55% crit and hitting at 258, ignoring all armor penetration at this point, we have 0% crit and 188 for Ezreal. So he needed to play the range game against her, try to make sure, juke out those attacks, get off those long-range pokes with Mystic Shots, trigger that Iceborne Gauntlet. Fortunately, no, he decided to just try to do it straight up, and that's the problem with late-game Miss Fortune. If she has a good run, which, by all means, 234 creeps, 224, it's respectable, you're not going to win a one-on-one with her. You have to play the range game. And that's what blue build Ezreal is supposed to be doing.
Not a very good fight, I have to say, for the blue team. They just completely fought while Ezreal was dead. He was still at the base. He was still doing all that.
Dead again.
Yeah, he's dead again. And so the blue team, not really sure what they were thinking with that initiation. They didn't have enough damage, and they're certainly not... Maybe they thought they were too far ahead. The kills, obviously they are ahead in kills, but as we know, kills aren't everything. The red team has taken every single Draken that has come up this game, I believe.
Yes.
So that really helps them in gold, that helps them get back into fights. I'm really not sure what the blue team was trying to do with that engagement.
So right now they are clumping up. They're going to be taking this tower, which is good because that's exactly what we were just talking about, how they weren't doing that. They get that tower. They're going to go for this inhibitor, but unfortunately, I don't know why Miss Fortune decided to...
and Jace.
Yeah, like two of your biggest AD tower damage dealers are no longer there. And in fact, Casson is just going to play the vision game with her in this bush, take her out. Again, another big problem with Miss Fortune. If she doesn't have Make It Rain, can't see into the bush. And if you can't see into the bush, you can't auto attack, which means all that damage is absolutely useless. Now, we are having blue, they're going to try to rebuff this a little bit, but there has to be a point where you guys decide it's no longer worth it because you just gave a triple kill to Kennen.
Wow, what a triple kill. And, face-checking a bush against Khazadin without sight is probably not the best champ to do that against either, but we're seeing quite a few mistakes on both teams' sides right there. Even Kennen just not choosing the right place to back even. Something so simple can really help turn a game into one team's favor. So now we're seeing a 2v2 instead of a 3v2. But right now, neither team is really in a position to push down anything. All the minion lanes are near the middle of the lane, and that's really something that I want to see a little bit more of, are some of these push controls. You want to have the minions pushing in your favor, because say, you're backed up, your top lane is... The top lane minions for their team are knocking at your door, and so are the bottom lane minions. You push out the mid lane a bit, you win a team fight. What are you going to do with that team fight? You can keep pushing down mid, but assume a scenario like this where their inhibitor's already down. You could push down mid and try to get a Nexus tower, but if there's one or two or three members of the blue team still alive, they'll be able to defend that. So you really want all the pushes to be as in your favor as you could possibly get them.
There's definitely multiple phases to this game. Early game phase, you're really focused about your laning, getting your gold up so that you can feed into your mid. And then late game is really is about, completing those objectives, winning the team fights, or taking any advantage that you can. So yes, we did finally see them, push in. But as time goes on, those death timers are only going to get bigger and bigger. One misstep on one teammate could spell the end for either team.
Yeah, we want to see both teams start grouping up, especially the blue team. I don't want to see anyone from the blue team get caught out from now on. This is the time where someone on their team has to say, all right, guys, let's buckle down. We can only win these team fights if we have all five of us here.
And that's very much, a typical late game, especially in the higher elo brackets, so the higher division brackets. If you're watching LCS, one misstep and game could be over. Doesn't matter if you're 10 lives ahead, 10 kills, 10 towers, one misstep, and we're gonna have to see who's gonna misstep first here.
I'm liking that Cannon ultimate. He was really able to catch two members of the blue team out, and he caught Kassadin after he rift walked. He basically rift walked into the fight, into Cannon's ultimate, and I think, a little bit of credit to Cannon and a little bit of discredit to Kassadin. You never want to ult into the enemy team when there's a Cannon right there, because even if his ult isn't up right now, it's about to come, and at that point Cannon, I think he might have had some prediction to say, alright, Kassadin's here, he's probably going to want to jump in the back line and burst down Miss Fortune. I'm going to ult, I'm going to stay near Miss Fortune and make sure he dies. So pretty good play by Cannon right there, but not the best play by Kassadin.
So I'm rewinding, I'm looking at this fight, and just as Fiddlesticks, who by the way is in the fog, they can't see him, which is again beautiful placement from him. He's going to use that gap closer to get in here, and that's going to be beautiful for him because now they're going to put together all of their ultimates. We saw the Vengeful go out, we saw the slicing, we saw the party time. Kassadin, as you said, is about to use his Rift Block. We don't even have Arcane Shift available for Pit Viz. He used it to try to land some damage on top of the support Maokai, which for some reason was a good idea for him. So Rift Block down, he gets stunned out when it comes up anyways. Pit Fizz actually didn't get caught out in this AoE, but the Trinity, it almost actually did end up like a Mickey Mouse, catching out Gorzanish, who used his Elastic Spring Shot to get into range, catching out Kassadin, who used the Rift Block, went right into it, instantly got demolished, and that's what Red Team really needed to do there. Now, unfortunately, Bullet Time comes out and doesn't hit anyone for Miss Fortune. No idea why, but, kudos right there to the Red.
You don't see this yet, so I'm going to say this very slowly so that you're probably going to see this when it happens. So the Red Team, they decided to take a Baron off of this, while there were still, 2 or 3 members of the Blue Team alive. They weren't too happy about that, I have to tell you that much. They were able to completely shut down that Baron attempt. They got a complete ace on the Red Team, and, that's one of those things, they didn't have enough sight into the enemy jungle. They had one ward sort of near the blue buff, but they didn't have a ward on both sides of the blue buff, which is something that you really want to consider when you're going for Baron. And not only that, but you also want to consider, if 1 or 2 people from the enemy team are alive, they can still screw up a Baron attempt. And you never want to write that out. You never want to say, alright, well, it's just Lux. I mean, she was playing support early game. There's nothing she can do to stop us. Well, she has a death cap now, and on top of that, she's got a lot of range as well as quite a bit of CC. So, you don't want to discredit anyone, and they really just lost an inhibitor for trying to take that Baron, and even though they secured it, they completely lost it. No one on their team survived.
Yeah, getting a Baron for an ace, not worth it whatsoever. What I'm very curious about is the decision, who made the decision to go for the Baron, because nobody had any health. Like, all the teammates there at Baron were under half health. So as soon as Kassadin saw this, he's like, oh great, I have a cooldown that gets reduced every time you cast a spell. You have no health. I'm just going to go in here and AoE the hell out of all of you. He gets a triple kill out of it, no problem.
Lux gets caught out. Ooh, you guys got to ward a little bit more doing this. We see 3 total wards at 4. Ezreal just placed 1. 4 total wards out on the map. Certainly not enough this late into the game because, as you keep saying, one little misstep is enough to turn the entire game, and we're seeing that right here. Lux got caught out equals an inhibitor. This is completely late game. This is high stakes. One little thing and such a huge consequence could come out of it. But now they're going in for the fight. I like the fact that Kennen went in there, but I think that was actually a little bit of a preemptive Zhonya's because he could have used the mobility from not using Zhonya's because Zhonya's locks you down. You can't move. So he could have used the mobility to keep people in his ultimate because people just, oh, it's Kennen ulting. We're just going to walk away. They didn't bother focusing him because they knew he was going to Zhonya's. But in that same respect, they didn't focus him. So you shouldn't Zhonya's yet. You should Zhonya's when they start to focus you.
And that's exactly right. That's when you want to use it, as soon as you get that attention. Otherwise, you're avoiding damage that's not there. And it is a waste. It does immobilize you. I remember back in the day, people would get Zhonya's on Nunu because they didn't know how it worked, and then they was trying to channel and then immediately use it, and it didn't do anything at all. Pretty funny stuff. But in terms of that last fight, I mean, yes, the Zhonya's really did hurt them. And if you notice, they did get aced out of this. They did get that inhibitor, but that's all they got. They got 3 kills and 4 if you count Lux. Ezreal didn't go down. Key point there. He did use his mobility to get away from everything. We used the Guardian Angel and then died again on Boo Boo Keys, which again, Guardian Angel on Gangplank, not entirely too sure about that one. He did sell off his Static Shiv, which again, I find a little strange, but he's going very much a tank plank, which I think is what you wanted to see earlier on. Yep. But the problem here is, they didn't kill the Kassadin until very late. And that's where that ace came from, because he was able to come back in here, buy enough time, Ezreal followed them in, and because they didn't kill that Kassadin is because they lost out so many more people late. If that Zhonya's had actually worked out and he had, chased down the Kassadin with the rest of the team, use your CC to your advantage, might have been a different story, but what happened there is 3 kills, 4, 5, and all they got was an inhibitor. Not the best of trades.
And going back onto that, we say it's not the best of trades, but as the game progresses, we can see what the blue team decided to do with winning that team fight, what they decided to do with the ace, which was basically nothing. They pushed out mid lane to the middle, and, Lux went back. I checked her gold when she went back. She had about 900 gold, so that was enough. She got a blasting wand. But at the same time, you could be pushing bottom lane, you could be pushing top lane. You need to get some of these minions pushing in your favor, because right now the entire game is based around the mid lane. We see, all right, this team won a team fight, they're pushing down in the mid lane inhibitor. This team won a team fight, they're pushing back, taking the other inhibitor. But we're not seeing anything on any other front. And I really like the fact that Zac is now saying, all right, I'm just going to start split pushing top. I need this to happen. Now at this point, he's got the minions pushing in his favor. I don't think he needs Lux there as well. They need to drop back. They needed to defend this tower. And if they stay a little bit too long, they could really be losing in inhibitor tower.
On that note, it is going to be a 2-3 split, but with everybody in the bottom lane, we've actually had Misfortune now go back. Here goes Kennen. He's going to try this party trick again. No, the fiddles. Oh, that's not how you gap close as a fiddlesticks. Absolutely useless. But they did put up the pressure. They forced back the defenders. They're going to get themselves a tower. But they're not going to lose their top because Misfortune's there. So, because Lux wasn't there, you mean she was not here for these fights. And I don't know why, but Lux decided to get herself an Abyssal Scepter. Very useless item on Lux, because everything she has is long range, which is out of the range of the Abyssal Scepter. So all it's giving her is magic resist at this point. And because now everyone's back in town, it's a 5-on-4, they were able to defeat this red team push. But the red team did get the tower, brought the inhibitor to half. Not exactly worth an ace, as we're seeing more and more as time goes on. But Misfortune going back, I mean, they sent back one person to defend top, which is perfect. Fortunately, we had 2 attackers, not so perfect. And they initially weren't winning that bottom fight. They lost the tower, but then they did win the fight because they did bring back Lux. And overall, it started off as poor decisions, but they ended up as good decisions.
I want to see a Rylai's built on Kennen, and I think I wanted to see that a little bit earlier, maybe instead of Woda, because that helps him quite a bit, because we know the blue team, they want to get outside of his ultimate, and they have the means to do that. A Rylai's would help, if, say, Ezreal were to Arcane Shift in, or Kassadin were to Rift Walk in, they would have a much harder time walking out if he had a Rylai's. And on top of that, he could proc Liandry's with his Rylai's on his ultimate, because Liandry's does double the burn damage if they're slowed, if they have movement impairness. And at the moment, Kennen doesn't have the movement impair unless he lands all 3 stacks, until he lands all 3 stacks. So at that point, then there'll be movement impaired. But before then, it's not really going to help them out too much. Now, with the Woda, it does help him as well as Fiddlesticks stay alive. However, at the same time, it's not the item it used to be. Team fights are less of who can survive the longest as they are to who can survive the initial burst. And Woda doesn't really help out too much in that respect. And Kennen, he should either go with something that would help him survive the initial burst or help him put out more damage in the initial burst. And honestly, Rylai's would do both.
Rylai's, I mean, you get tanky, you get slow, more damage. Win-win scenario there. But if he doesn't get it, he doesn't get it. At least it looks like he's going to be extremely late to the party in terms of that. I'm looking at this top lane. It's just shenanigans. Everyone's leaping and running and kiting, and Apokrita being absolutely useless, as he normally is with these kind of strange Boo Boo Keys. I mean, he is extremely tanky at this point. He has no fear whatsoever. He goes in there, provides a focus point for the enemy team, and as you can see, They traded out 2 for 2. Could have been a lot worse. Wow, I don't know what Cassidy was doing. Okay, so it is a lot worse now. Zach's not there. Zach's teleporting in for suicide measure.
You know, he doesn't really have much AP. The only damage he has is Blasting Wand. I'm not sure if he expected to pick up a kill off of this or something like that, but everyone, you know, Jace is the only one who's been taken under half health, and he still has a Guardian Angel on top of that, so not really sure what that teleport was all about. He could tank him for quite a while, and, you know, he stayed alive for a good deal, but that doesn't really mean anything if you can't put out enough damage to make anything happen out of it. So he basically, instead of defending this turret, he went out a little bit too far, and there goes another inhibitor, and in fact, maybe 2 or 3 inhibitors.
This should be game. I mean, we got 15 seconds until the oh-so-scary Lux is alive.
Oh, right.
Right, so this should be game right here. And
Yeah,
we do
it
got
should.
GG Will Plays coming out. If it's not, all they have to do is swing down and pick up the 3rd inhibitor, but no, it's definitely it. Again, death timers become your enemy as the time does go on again and again and again. Something there at the last fight, again, I was looking at Misfortune, you know, I was looking at Pet My Fizz, you know, last time he tried to 1v1 Misfortune, got absolutely destroyed. And unfortunately, it didn't actually turn out to be any different this time because he keeps trying to engage her in attack range. And if you look at her items, not only is she, you know, really close to max attack speed, she has 55% crit on top of something like 400 damage. So that'll crit not only with the armor penetration, but a Blade of the Ruined King in there as well. Like, Pet My Fizz just absolutely did not build this blue buff Ezreal as he should have.
Yeah,
Not
and
at
once
Blue
you
build Ezreal, sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Once you get close to someone who has a Blade of the Ruined King, you know, they use the Blade of the Ruined King, you get slowed, it's that much harder to stay away from them, to get that range damage that we keep talking about Ezreal being great at, is the range damage.
Range damage, cooldowns, and just, like, there's no mirror mana here. So first of all, there's no range damage. And then the cooldowns is just, he didn't use them to run away. He always used them to engage, which then robs you of your ability to run away. So I don't know what was going on instead.
Yeah, another thing is that I don't really like to see Blade of the Ruined King built so early on Blue Ezreal. Like, it's a fine late item or last item or something of the sort, but as you said, he doesn't really have all that much damage. He doesn't have enough damage, and Blade of the Ruined King, it doesn't really help your Qs do that much damage. I mean, you get a little bit of lifesteal, you get 25 attack damage, but compare that to the amount of damage you would get from a Manamune, which ends up turning into a Mere Mana, but it gives you attack damage based on how much mana you have, and on top of that, once it transforms, you get an extra bonus damage once you activate it. So it's a really big amount of damage that he's missing, and Bloodthirster I don't really think made all that damage back.
Now, it's a good idea to go Bloodthirster on Misfortune, especially in this case because she doubled her lifesteal with Blade of the Ruined King. If you were looking at the last fight, she was lifestealing 100 plus per attack. That was almost negating any of the damage Ezreal was throwing at her anyways. It was pretty silly, to be honest. But double lifesteal on Misfortune works out extremely well because of the attack speed, the double up, you know, the on-hit Q, especially after things like, you know, the rest of the team kind of factors into it. It's just so hard to 1v1 here if you don't have that punch because you need to burn through that lifesteal. You see this often for AD carries and ARAMs. You get double lifesteal, and then they don't really have to worry, you know, about their positioning or their team because they can just kind of sustain through it through a lot of those team fights.
I'm gonna come in here and ruin the professionalism and say that Misfortune is a bitch. There you go.
Yay. Input from Lunette the Herald.
I don't have anything